Was it that Veda, whose mother was a fisherwoman, became a Maharishi and wrote the Mahabharata? Or Kalidasa, who used to cut branches of trees in the forest, became the greatest poet we produced and became a Maharishi. Vishwamitra, who was known as Rishi of Rishis, was born in a Kshatriya family. And the Dalits who own Valmiki and say that he was one of us, but he became a Maharishi and wrote the Ramayana. And nor was the Acharya or the Brahmin, if he broke any law, was above the law. Ravan was a Brahmin. Most people don't know that Ravan was a Brahmin. The British created a whole movement called the Dravidian movement. And Mr. Karunanidhi used to celebrate Ravan Leela while we were celebrating Ram Leela. On the grounds that Ravan was a South Indian king from Sri Lanka. Actually, Ravan was not born in South India. He was born near Delhi in a place called Noida. In a village called Basra. You can still go and see that village. He went to Mansarovar and he did tapas, and Lord Shiva gave him a boon, which he used to then he surveyed which part of the Indian subcontinent he could conquer, and he found that his relative Guber had developed Sri Lanka, and that's how he went to Sri Lanka. And his wife Mandodari was born in Meerut. So, but the British had concocted a history for us, which included that Ravan was a Dravidian king. For years, the South Indian movement of Dravidian parties celebrated Ravan Leela, but ultimately I can claim that I persuaded Mr. Karunanidhi to read the Tamil version of Ramayana, the Kamban Ramayana, and come to the conclusion that Ravan was indeed a North Indian. After that he lost interest in him. But Karunanidhi, however, never forgot that Rama was from North India. And he opposed him tooth and nail. And when I was arguing the Supreme Court that Rama Setu should be protected, he got so agitated that in public he said, who's Swami to call it Ram Setu, which is actually Adam's bridge? Did Ram build it? Does he have an engineering degree? Which engineering college he went to? Well, the following day he fell sick and he had to be admitted to hospital. The name of the hospital was Ramchandra Medical Hospital. I sent him a get well card and said, I hope he's got MBBS or an MD. Ramachandra ji has that. These are some of the false impressions that have been created about our Vedic past, which have to be removed. We are not a society of spiritual mendicants. We are a society which produced the maximum wealth for almost thousands of years. And till 1750, before the Industrial Revolution brought in locomotives and Bessemer blast furnace, we were considered amongst the most developed country. We were ahead of China till 1100 AD, and then the decline started, and China overtook us. But in the end, both were developed countries in the 1750s. It's only towards the 20th century that we became poor countries. Therefore, this system had produced this miracle. And the first principle would be division of labor according to the Varna system, which today we cannot replicate because it has got so embedded with birth that it's unrescuable in my opinion. And at least we need some period when we all forget our Varnas and treat ourselves as a Vedic society or a Hindu society and nothing more than that, and forget about our so-called Varna label. So one of the priorities we give, some of the priorities we give are, we have always been a society which has emphasized self-reliance, which we call Swadeshi. Then Swadeshi was a decentralized, was a concept which could go down to the village. So Swadeshi was always coupled with decentralization. And we wanted all our Janapadas, as Janakya had called, or society divisions, as self-sustaining, self-governing, self-contented, self-producing units. So this decentralization and producing out of your own resources. That didn't mean we didn't trade. We did trade. We traded with the whole of Southeast Asia. The Hindu stamp is quite obvious. The third priority we place is what I would broadly call as dharma, as applied to economics. Now, if I am a capitalist and I build a factory and pump a lot of smoke into the air without any safeguards on environment, I am maximizing my profit, but I am ruining the society. I am creating ill health in society. So this concept of private cost and private revenue, and therefore private profit as a deduction of costs from revenue, is a capitalist concept, but it is not part of our Vedic way of thinking. Our Vedic way of thinking is much more in keeping with what today Western economists use the terminology of social cost and social revenue. And that social revenue minus social cost is what needs to be maximized. Social cost takes into account what benefits accrues to society. Supposing in a dark street I put lamps, electric lamps. That electric lamp enables the whole society. It can't be consumed. There's no such thing as consuming light, except of course the bulb may be fused or the electricity may run out. But otherwise, this is a thing that the more you use that light, it doesn't mean that you have less for somebody else. So it's a social good in that sense. Or I start an orchard, put a very simple example, an orchard, and that orchard, when it flowers, the bees come and sit on it, and then later on produce honey. So if there's a person next door who starts a honey producing beehive setup, he will free of cost be able to produce the honey which he can sell. The benefit of organizing that way is something which is essentially you will find in our Vedic system. And this is what I call as dharma, where you consider the overall social impact of your private pursuit of economics. And therefore this social consciousness is very, very deeply built into the Vedic system. And finally, we have something called Sanmati, that means create consensus. If today in a market system we go by majority decisions, then it is possible for a society by majority to prefer, say, coffee, and prefer coffee to tea, and tea to chocolate or hot chocolate. And yet by the same majority calculation, you can find that chocolate will be preferred to coffee. That is, the choices become what is called as intransitive. Logically, if I prefer A to B and B to C, then I must prefer A to C. But in a democratic framework, where everybody has a freedom to do what he wants, the laissez-faire principle, then you can show situations, which I have shown in my writings, that by majority selection, the market selection, so to speak, A can be preferred to B and B can be preferred to C, and at the same time C can be preferred to A. That is called inconsistency. And that is something we abhor in our Vedic society, and that's why we talk about consensus. Consensus produces logical choices, it produces consistency. So these are some of the priorities that we have in a Vedic system. Now, in terms of strategy, the Western society and the communist society have been divided on purely